Hello, biologists. Today we're going to work on Lab 4.13, which is the handbook part of the nitrogen cycle on gizmos. So this is Lab 4.13. Here we go. We're an environmental engineer working for the Environmental Protection Agency. The job of the EPA is to protect human health and the environment. We have a report from a hospital about a sick baby, so let's go find out about that. Her name is Jennifer Westing. She's 6 weeks. She weighs 11 pounds. Things seemed to be okay when she was born. No problems. But then things got sick. She got sick. You can see her blue lips, her blue fingertips, her blue toes. Things are not looking all right for Jennifer, so we need to figure out what's going on. She was brought to the emergency room because she couldn't breathe, and so now we need to help her out. She's been treated and she's making a good recovery, but the big deal is that there's other babies in the neighborhood who's have the same syndrome. It's called blue baby syndrome, and let's look at this. Blue baby syndrome is where a baby's skin can look blue, and this happens. Either can be a problem with the heart and lungs, or in this case, it's by nitrates in drinking water. And this happens in Minnesota. We found out about this in Lab 4.12. We look at the Minnesota Department of Health, and it's definitely a problem here in Minnesota. Oxygen is carried by a protein called hemoglobin in your blood. You can see your blood running through your veins here, and hemoglobin is carrying the oxygen. When your hemoglobin changed to methemoglobin by exposure to nitrate, it doesn't drop off the blood anymore. It's like an Amazon driver driving around with all the packages. It never stops and drops off the packages. It just hangs on to them all day, which it's basically not doing its job. It would be like a UPS or Amazon driver just driving around the countryside all day with all the packages and never stopping to deliver them. That's what methemoglobin does. It's supposed to be, hemoglobin is supposed to be, when it's functioning correctly, like in you and me, it drives all over your body and drops off oxygen to all your cells. But when it's exposed to a lot of nitrates in babies, it turns to methemoglobin and doesn't do its job. It's not dropping off the oxygen. So it's just hanging on to it. So it's very important to find the cause of all these other blue baby cases. They all seem to be occurring along this river, and so we're going to do some investigating what's going on with this drinking water problem. But before we do anything, we have to check into the handbook here and learn some things about the nitrogen cycle. So we're going to figure out why nitrogen is important. All organisms need nitrogen to live. You have a lot of nitrogen going on in you right now in your DNA, in your proteins. And remember, proteins make up your skin, your hair, your bones, your muscles, a lot of the enzymes that your cells need to function. Those proteins have nitrogen in them, and so does your DNA. So we need nitrogen. One of the proteins that we need, of course, is hemoglobin to drop off that oxygen in all of our cells so we can do cellular respiration. We get our nitrogen, like if you're a vegan, you get it from plants, or even if you're not a vegan and you eat lots of plants, you get your nitrogen from them. Or if you eat meat, you get it from meat too. Obviously, we can get nitrogen from a lot of sources, so you don't have to eat meat, but some people do. Plants are a good source of nitrogen. Animals that don't eat other animals get all of their nitrogen from plants, or people who don't eat animals get all of their nitrogen from plants. For plants to make amino acids, which is what we make proteins out of, what they make proteins out of, they need a source of nitrogen. This source is ammonia. So how do plants get ammonia? Ammonia, you can see 1 nitrogen and 3 hydrogens. Those are the white, and the nitrogen's blue here. Ammonia has 1 nitrogen atom and 3 hydrogen atoms. To learn how plants get ammonia, we need to know how ammonia is made and where to find the nitrogen. Nitrogen is an important part of the air we breathe. The air is actually about 78% nitrogen. Hopefully you learned that in lab 4.12. But the thing that's the problem is plants can't use the nitrogen in the air. They don't have any way to pick up all that nitrogen. It can move into the leaves through small holes called stomata. That's kind of the lungs of a plant. But plants can't use that nitrogen. We can watch the stomata here. Carbon dioxide will go in. That's what plants use to kind of build themselves. They build carbon out of that. But the nitrogen goes in. You can see the blue go in here. We'll watch carbon dioxide. That gets used up, turns into oxygen. And the nitrogen goes in and out, doesn't get used up. So the reason that plants can't use nitrogen is this triple bond between the nitrogens. Remember we saw the University of Minnesota professor kind of holding that molecule and showing that it's really, really connected, and that triple bond is very, very difficult to break. It's almost like super glue between the two nitrogen atoms. So plants need a little help. They get some help from bacteria in the soil that can convert nitrogen gas into ammonia. Let's check this out. So this bacteria is kind of plant's best friend. It has an enzyme in it that can break that bond between the nitrogen. This is a very important enzyme, and farmers really like this enzyme because it's a free source of fertilizer for their plants. Enzymes are the answer to a lot of things in biology, but especially the nitrogen problem. So enzymes are proteins that make chemical reactions happen. Hopefully that's review for you. Some bacteria have an enzyme called nitrogenase that can break the triple bond in N2 to make ammonia. And nitrogenase is your best friend as a farmer because it basically makes free fertilizer for you. When you see ace at the end of the word, it usually means break down. So it can break down that really tough nitrogen triple bond between the nitrogen gas here. Let's watch it happen. So we can see ATP come in, and that powers the reaction, gives some energy, chemical energy to the enzyme. And then the enzyme's going to kind of glue on some bond, some hydrogen on there to make ammonia. The conversion of nitrogen gas to ammonia is called nitrogen fixation. So when we go from nitrogen gas to NH3 to ammonia, that's awesome because plants can then use the ammonia to grow and bring nitrogen into their plant bodies and make proteins and make DNA, make the things they need to make with nitrogen. Plants can take ammonia through their roots. And we also saw the importance of ammonia as a fertilizer when we were watching the video in Lab 412. We saw how the University of Minnesota is working to make ammonia on a smaller scale using wind power and nitrogen from the air and H2 hydrogen from water. They can break down water and get hydrogen from the water. So plants use ammonia from these nitrogen fixing bacteria, and they also use nitrogen that's provided as fertilizer. Bacteria convert nitrogen gas to ammonia are called nitrogen fixing bacteria, and they're your best friends as farmers because that's free fertilizer. These bacteria live in many places, including lakes, rivers, oceans, and especially the soil. As a farmer, especially an organic farmer that can't use nitrogen fertilizers, they can't use ammonia because it's against the rules. They really have to pay attention to their soil and their nitrogen fixing bacteria. So let's fix some nitrogen here. Nitrogen goes in from the air and out comes ammonia. Score bonus for plants. They get ammonia that they can use to make proteins. So which graph shows the presence of nitrogen-fixing bacteria in the soil? Well, this one shows ammonia going down and nitrogen going up. That doesn't make a lot of sense because this bacteria is using up nitrogen and making ammonia. So this graph, where nitrogen's going down because it's being used up by the bacteria, and ammonia's going up, which is what plants need, that makes sense. This graph here doesn't make sense because both nitrogen and ammonia are staying the same. And if the bacteria is metabolizing nitrogen, if it's using nitrogen, that doesn't make any sense. So let's go with this one. And let's make our explanation that nitrogen fixing bacteria use N2 gas from the air to make NH3 that plants can use. N2 goes down and NH3 goes up when nitrogen fixing bacteria are active. So let's see if we got the answer right here. Woohoo! Nitrogen fixing bacteria use up nitrogen gas to produce more ammonia. This means that over time N2 concentration should go down and NH3 concentration should go up. So our N2 concentration is going down, our NH3 concentration is going up, our ammonia concentration, that NH3 is going up, and plants win because they can use that NH3 to make anything that requires nitrogen. But wait, there's a problem. This is where the nitrogen cycle gets a little bit complicated, but it's okay, we can handle it. Bacteria have converted nitrogen gas to ammonia, but other bacteria compete with plants to use that ammonia. So there are other bacteria that use ammonia as food. And they quickly use up any ammonia that's produced by nitrogen-fixing bacteria. So we have to follow the story of the rest of the bacteria and see what happens. Look at the competition here. So there are two types of nitrifying bacteria in the nitrogen cycle. The first uses ammonia as food. These bacteria add oxygen to NH3 to make nitrite. And think of nitrite as being trite or short. It only has 2 oxygens. We're also going to talk about nitrate that has 3 oxygens, and we'll think of that as something that ate an extra oxygen. So we're going to make nitrite. Nitrite has 2 oxygens. It's trite, it's short. If you're trite with someone, you're being short with them, you're being kind of snarky. The second bacteria here in this cycle uses nitrite to make nitrate. So it, like nitrate, ate an extra oxygen, like maybe your sibling ate the last donut, and so they ate an extra oxygen. It's just a way to, it's a silly way to remember the difference between nitrite, which has 2 oxygens, and nitrate has 3. It ate an extra one. These reactions release energy that the bacteria use to grow and survive. So we're going to make some nitrate here. We take nitrite, goes into this bacteria, and it makes nitrate. Now it turns out that plants can actually use this nitrate. So these 2 bacteria are actually a friend of plants as well. So let's just replay that one more time. We've got ammonia being turned into nitrite, and then nitrite being turned into nitrate. And all this requires oxygen. That's important later when we come to waterways. When these bacteria are in waterways, they use up some oxygen and they're competing with like fish and other organisms that might need that oxygen in the water. The conversion of ammonia to nitrate is called nitrification. So when ammonia goes to nitrite, that's called nitrification. These bacteria that convert ammonia to nitrate are called nitrifying bacteria. Ammonia nitrifying bacteria convert ammonia to nitrite, and then nitrite nitrifying bacteria convert nitrite to nitrate. Don't worry so much about the different names here. This is just an overview, so you kind of know there are lots of different bacterial players going on in the nitrogen cycle. The that help plants out. And it's important when we think about soil health to think about all the different kinds of bacteria that are present in the soil and supporting and monitoring all those different kinds of bacteria to make sure that our soil is healthy and has enough nitrogen for our plants. So this is just, we're going to work through this just to kind of rehearse what's going on here in the soil. We have 30 grams of ammonia, 30 grams of nitrite, and 30 grams of nitrate, NO3, are all added to a soil sample. We're going to predict whether these concentrations would increase, decrease, or stay the same if ammonia nitrifying bacteria will add it to this sample. So this is ammonia nitrifying bacteria. It's going to take ammonia and turn it into nitrite. So the ammonia is going to go down. That makes sense. It's using ammonia. The nitrites are going to go up. That's what it's producing. And it's not this bacteria. We're not worried about nitrate here. So that's just going to stay the same because we don't have any of that in this soil. So we're just thinking about ammonia nitrifying bacteria. We've isolated that, and that's in our soil sample. Let's see what happens here. Yep, we're correct there. We're correct there. It makes sense that nitrites are being produced because this is ammonia nitrifying bacteria. And then nitrates are going to stay the same because we're not making any nitrate. Now we get to do the same thing, but we have a different bacteria this time. We have the nitrite nitrifying bacteria that's going to turn nitrite, those 2 oxygens, into nitrate, the 3 oxygen compound here, NO3. So NO2 is going to get turned into NO3. Ammonia is not involved here, so ammonia is going to stay the same. The nitrites are going to go down because that's what's getting used up, and the nitrates are going to go up because that's what's being produced. We're going from nitrite, NO2, to nitrate, NO3. So these bacteria don't deal with ammonia, so the ammonia level is not going to change. They use up nitrite, so that's going to go down. That's going to decrease. They convert nitrite to nitrate, so the nitrate's going to go up. As you can see, waste from one bacteria can be used as food for another. This is an example of how efficient nature is. Nothing's wasted. All the matter is recycled. So all this matter, nothing is lost as it goes through the nitrogen cycle. We start with nitrogen here. It goes to nitrogen fixing bacteria. They produce ammonia. Ammonia is food for the ammonia nitrifying bacteria. They produce NO2 as waste. That waste gets used as food by nitrite nitrifying bacteria that produce nitrate. And then nitrate is what can be used by plants. And we'll talk about that in a moment, but we also have to talk about kind of a bummer here. There's bacteria here called denitrifying bacteria that are kind of not the enemy, but they're not so great. Farmers aren't really excited about these denitrifying bacteria because they take nitrogen out of the soil and send it back into the air, which is not really what we want. We are trying to get nitrogen to our plants. Plants can use ammonia, woohoo. They can use nitrate, great, but they can't use it if it's just shoved back out into a gas and back into the atmosphere. So the conversion of NO3 to NO2 to N2 is called denitrification. It's done by denitrifying bacteria. Fortunately, not too many of them are in healthy soil, so it's another way that we have to monitor our soil and make sure that not too many of these are growing, because that gets rid of nitrogen in our soil. So nitrates can also be used as food in the soil. Denitrifying bacteria use these nitrates, NO3, as food. Here's denitrification. This is kind of a bummer for farmers who are trying to get nitrogen to the plants. The nitrogen goes back into the air in this part of the system. So they try not to have too many of those bacteria around. If you're monitoring your soil health, you want to monitor your denitrifying bacteria. Denitrification releases N2 gas back into the air. However, denitrifying bacteria only remove a small amount, and we want to keep it small if we're monitoring soil health. So there goes the nitrogen back into the air. The rest of the nitrates are taken up by plants through their roots. Woohoo! The plants are getting nitrogen now. They can use NO3, and they can they turn it into compounds that they can use in their cells, and we'll see how that happens. Nitrates are converted into enzymes by converted to ammonia by two enzymes located in plant cells. The first enzyme removes an oxygen to convert nitrate back into nitrite. We'll watch that happen. So we're removing some oxygen from the NO3 and we're making it an to NO2, nitrite. And then the nitrite is going to head into the chloroplast here, and it's going to get made into ammonia. So there's an enzyme outside the chloroplast, there's an enzyme in the chloroplast, and those two enzymes working together can turn NO3 into ammonia, which plants can use to get nitrogen. Which is a big deal because without nitrogen, plants can't grow. And there's usually limited nitrogen in your soil, so adding nitrogen to your soil helps grow more plants and feed more people. So we're making ammonia in the plants. Where do plants get the nitrogen they need to create amino acids and DNA? Let's read this. Plants get their nitrogen from nitrogen gas. Well, we know that's not true. It comes into the stomata and goes right out. They can't use it. Plants take up nitrates from the soil and convert them into ammonia. We just looked at that process, so that's definitely true. Nitrogen-fixing bacteria convert nitrogen gas into ammonia, and the plants take up some of that ammonia through their roots, but they have to compete with other bacteria. We know that's true as well. So since both B and C are true, the correct answer is D. They get their nitrogen from nitrogen-fixing bacteria, although they have to compete with other bacteria to pick up that ammonia. But then nitrifying bacteria convert that ammonia into NO3, and plants can pick up that NO3 and turn it back into ammonia. So they can use both ammonia and NO3 nitrates as nitrogen. In plants, nitrates are absorbed, taken in by the roots, and converted into nitrites and then to ammonia. The ammonia can be used for things like proteins and DNA. For plants, nitrates are nutrients, and they can be changed to make things that the plants need to live. That's called assimilation, and we do assimilation as well when we bring nitrogen into our bodies. When an animal eats a plant, they digest, they break down the plant into the molecules they need to live. And this is an example of assimilation. Like if you eat chicken nuggets here, not that everyone eats chicken, but some people do. If you eat a chicken, then the nitrogen from the chicken goes into you. Or if you eat a tomato, the nitrogen from the tomato goes into you, and you assimilate that nitrogen and use it to make DNA and proteins. Nitrogen is returned to the nitrogen cycle when plants and animals die or when animals produce urine or feces. You've probably smelled ammonia if you've been in a porta potty in the summer. It stinks, it's nasty. That's the smell of ammonia in human waste. Pretty gross, but it is what it is. So plants, animals, everything that dies, all that stuff doesn't go away. It goes back into the soil, and those nutrients, like the carbon, the nitrogen, the oxygen, the phosphorus, all those nutrients get recycled and used again by plants and animals. So here's the nitrogen cycle. When decomposers produce ammonia, the nitrogen cycle begins again. Bacteria convert the ammonia into nitrates, then nitrates. Plants take in that NO3, the nitrates, make more ammonia, which is used to make DNA and proteins. They die, it goes back to ammonia and starts all over again. The conversion of nitrogen from one form to another is called the nitrogen cycle. And it's just one example of how matter cycles through the ecosystem. We'll also look at the carbon cycle and maybe a little bit at the phosphorus cycle, which is also an important nutrient. If ammonia, nitrate, and nitrate build up in an ecosystem, they can be toxic to many organisms, including humans. And that's where Jennifer Westing comes in, because she's getting too much nitrate through well water in her baby bottles. Well water is used to make her formula, and she's drinking that, and that too much nitrate is turning her blood into a chocolate brown methemoglobin that's not dropping off its oxygen. It's like the UPS driver that's not dropping off its packages. Our hemoglobin is functional. It's awesome. It's going around like a UPS driver and dropping off oxygen packages at all of our cells. But the methemoglobin in Jennifer, the sick blue baby, is not dropping off the oxygen. That's because it's been exposed to too much nitrate in her drinking water. So there are over 7 billion humans on Earth, going to 8 pretty soon. Each person's urine and feces adds ammonia to the environment. This waste can be toxic if it enters rivers and oceans. Humans use wastewater treatment plants to take the ammonia out of the water before emptying it into rivers. In a lot of places, unfortunately, in the world, they don't have wastewater treatment. So this ammonia, this nitrogen isn't recycled appropriately. It goes into the waterways and can cause some problems. Also, cows often don't have sewage treatment plants for their waste. And so animal waste, cows, pigs, horses, chickens, all produce waste as well, and their nitrogen also goes into the system, and if there's too much, it can cause problems. So nitrogen is good, it helps plants grow. Nitrogen also has issues. If there's too much of it, it can cause problems in your water. So here are sources of nitrogen. To grow enough food, we add fertilizer to our crops. These are fertilizers are ammonia and nitrate. If farmers don't take care when using their fertilizers, their chemicals could be washed into streams, rivers, lakes. You've probably seen that if you've driven by a lake that stinks and is like green and gross and you don't want to swim in it because it's just covered in algae. That's probably because some of either it's gotten fertilizer washed into it, which is often the case, but also sometimes people who live around the lake, their septic systems aren't treating the nitrogen in human waste properly, and some of that human waste is getting into the lake, and having too much nitrogen in the lake makes them green and nasty. So when ammonia ends up in rivers, nitrifying bacteria use it as food. By adding oxygen to ammonia, these bacteria make nitrate as a waste product. They can reduce the amount of oxygen in rivers. So it's the bacteria, not the algae, that cause problems. So if you add a bunch of nitrogen to a water body, algae grows like crazy, and then they die and they get broken down by bacteria. That bacteria is grabbing oxygen out of the water, and they're making the ammonia here, the NH3, into NO3, and in order to do that, they need a bunch of oxygen. So they're pulling that oxygen out of the river water. And when they pull the oxygen out of the river water, you can see they're adding oxygen. They compete with fish. Both the bacteria and the fish need oxygen. Without oxygen, the fish die. They decompose. You probably smelled rotting fish. And they add more ammonia to the ecosystem. Part of the smell of rotting fish is that ammonia, that nitrogen. The bacteria are excited, like, woohoo, we got more ammonia. And they take more oxygen out of the water. So you get into a positive feedback cycle. They're killing off the fish are adding more ammonia, more bacteria, more oxygen sucked out of the water, killing more fish. So it's a positive feedback cycle. The oxygen keeps dropping, and it produces dead zones, both in local lakes and down here, because a lot of our water flows into the Mississippi. It carries all that fertilizer and all that bacteria that's sucking oxygen down into the ocean, and there's giant dead zones here that can develop in the ocean right where the Mississippi flows into it. They're dead because there's no oxygen in the water, so there can't be any fish. The large amount of nitrate can make the water toxic to any organisms that drink it, including humans. It's very important that humans limit the amount of nitrogen that we add to rivers because it can cause big problems. And that's part of Jennifer's issue. We're going to go back to the case in the next lab here and talk more about Jennifer and what we can do in her community to reduce the amount of nitrogen in local rivers, which then, of course, get in her well and cause problems and those blue babies, which we don't want in our community because we want babies to be healthy. So we'll go back to the case in the next lab. Thanks for coming and doing Lab 413 with me. Make sure you take a screenshot of your score and put it in the folder, assignment folder.